don't default immediately to no and why things won't work. Let's ask the questions and think about, like, is there a path to this being successful? There's always the chance something won't work, but if you go that way, you'll end up saying no to everything. An organization isn't going to grow that way. They'll just kind of be in a culture of a slow decline.
Hey everyone, I'm Monica Holt, and this is Arts Unscripted. Most arts organizations can get stuck in a familiar information sharing machine. Programming makes the decisions, then they hand it off to marketing who sells it, and then when a show underperforms, it becomes pretty easy to point fingers. But organizations who are evolving past that machine and finding a truly trusting workplace, well, that's shown that there are real results that occur across metrics for the organization. Enter Charles, Melissa, and John. Respectively, they're the directors of marketing, artistic planning, and learning and engagement at the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. They operate without silos, without handoffs, and without a hierarchy of programs. The result? Record revenue, record audiences, and a learning and engagement program that has gone from marginal to world-class in just 2 years. Let's dive in. Welcome, Charles, John, and Melissa. Thank you so much for being here on Arts Unscripted today. I think maybe the best way to get started is with some quick introductions. So could we do a little bit of background on each of you and maybe what your first interaction with the arts was? And then I'd love to hear a little bit about your current role at the Sydney Symphony. Does Charles want to kick us off?
Thank you, Monica. Good to be here with you today. My first memorable interaction with the arts was as a teenager going to see Phantom of the Opera in the big city of Buffalo, New York, which was 3 hours from where I grew up in a very rural area on the border of New York and Pennsylvania, where we didn't have a lot of access to big performances or productions. So that moment for me was like, wow, I didn't know about this. And I, from there, went on to work across ticketing jobs like many people in the arts do, and eventually led to marketing. And I worked in marketing at the New York Philharmonic and at the Detroit Symphony before coming to the Sydney Symphony about 2 years ago as the director of marketing, where I oversee all of marketing, communications, customer service for the organization.
Wonderful. Melissa, will you give us a little bit of your background?
Thanks, Monica. I grew up in New Zealand, and my sort of pathway to the arts was that my mum loved how music made her feel. And so I grew up with her, playing Marian Anderson and Mario Lanza records and things. And she loved the Grieg piano concerto. So I think I was about 12 or 13, and she said, "Don't make any plans on Sunday. There's something I want you to watch with me, and I think you'll like it." And it was the opera Rosenkavalier. I thought my head had been blown open. So I ended up actually going the drama path through the box office as well, like Charles. And my first orchestra that I worked for was the Sydney Symphony in the 90s. And since then, I have gone off and worked at the New Zealand Symphony and then the Melbourne Symphony. And now I'm back at the Sydney Symphony for my second tour of duty and to close the circle. I'm the director of artistic planning, so I'm responsible for the programming and the season planning, and my team and I sort of put that big jigsaw together.
Wonderful. And John, last but certainly not least.
I can't honestly say that I remember, which is a bit tricky, but I grew up in a little tiny desert town called Alice Springs, right in the centre of Australia. I think probably the first time I ever heard an orchestra was the Darwin Symphony Orchestra performing in the dry riverbed in the middle of town, where they put up a stage and did an amazing performance. I also remember going on a school trip to see Peter and the Wolf at the Araluen Arts Centre and absolutely hating it. And never being so bored in my entire little life. But I think, like Melissa, I had a mum who loved music and just made sure it was always there. I remember one day looking in a university handbook and seeing that one of the degrees could lead to a career in arts administration. And up until that point, it had never occurred to me that was a thing. And I just thought, great, I'll do that.
Easy peasy.
that was it. But I think uniquely for someone in my job, I'm not a musician or an educator. I'm a career administrator. I've done the rounds of the Australian Symphony Orchestras. So I've worked at the Queensland Symphony Orchestra in Brisbane and the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra at the same time as Melissa 6 years ago. I've also done a stint working in the learning and participation team at the Royal Opera House in London, and started my career at the Sydney Children's Choir 15, 16 years ago. So now I'm Director of Learning and Engagement at the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. So I look after all the schools and family programming and our emerging artists programs and our regional touring, probably some other things that I'm not remembering right away, our Music for Health program.
So, as listeners are tuning in, it probably won't surprise anyone that the theme of our episode today is going to be collaboration and how these wonderful leaders all work together and demonstrate a form of leadership and collaboration that I think we can all learn a lot from, no matter where we are in our careers or organizations. But before we dive into that, for listeners who may not already be familiar, could you describe the Sydney Symphony Orchestra today? What makes it unique?
Well, we're the largest orchestra in Australia, a professional orchestra, a quadruple wind, so 104 players, and we do over 200 performances a year and have sort of a large subscription season plus a very large learning and engagement program, thanks to John, that is continuing to grow. And then, a portfolio of special events and that include collaborations with, pop stars and movies and sort of new work.
I think what's maybe special about the SSO right now that is perhaps different to how it's been in the past is there's been a real broadening of the program, and more than ever before, this is an orchestra that's reaching beyond the Sydney Opera House, which is, of course, will always be our home and is a massive important part of our identity, but complementing that with really broad programs right around the city and the state is, I think, maybe a characteristic of our current chapter, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. Could you give us a flavor of how your three departments would traditionally function, and how is that similar or different from the SSO?
I think that there's a very sort of typical relationship that exists between the areas that do artistic programming and the marketing team that I've seen across my career. I think that typically it's a relationship where you don't talk till the very end of the process. You're not really involved in each other's pieces of work. And then it's always the question of when something does well, who takes the credit? And then when something isn't the success you hope, who takes the blame? And I think that's anybody listening can relate to that.
Yeah, it's funny to hear you say that. I think about when I was in marketing, we used to feel like if a show was successful, programming got the credit. And if a show failed, marketing got the blame. And then when I was in programming, I found that it felt like when a show was successful, everyone was saying marketing did a great job of selling it. And when a show wasn't, it was, what was programming thinking putting this on the stage? So I think you're absolutely right that all of us can relate to feeling like there is one lane that we're supposed to be in and wondering who gets the glory and who gets left with the scraps.
Yeah, I used to describe it as a healthy tension, but actually it's not healthy and it doesn't need to be like that.
Take us back for a second to 2024 when Charles and John joined the Sydney Symphony. What was or wasn't working, and what really prompted the shift towards the deeper collaboration that you're enjoying today?
Yeah, I mean, I came back to the orchestra during COVID in 2020, and obviously it was a very scary time for all performing arts organizations. The Opera House was closed for this huge renovation. So there's a lot riding on things and the tensions were very high. And it was a little bit more stereotypical of the relationship between marketing and artistic. Suspicious might be a word that I would use to describe, and, not an environment where there was this free flow in discussion of, well, what are your concerns about this program, which is so normal for us now, and that sort of fear of not making targets. And so, yeah, this could not be more different. And it's, I've done this work for orchestras for more than 30 years, and this is the first experience quite on this level.
I think part of that is that each of us had worked at symphonies before. So we'd learned things along the way at each of the symphonies we worked at that we all our mindsets were in the exact same place without even knowing that. For me personally, I found several years before coming to this role that the closer that myself and my team drew into artistic, the better success we had. And so I kind of came in with that mindset. And I do recall being in an interview with Melissa actually for this position. And I think they asked me who was my closest working relationship. And I said it was the artistic person at the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. Our teams tried to do things together and, be coordinated from start to finish of any campaign or any program. So I wish I could say that we did a lot of work to make this happen, but it kind of took off quite quickly.
Yeah. And what this is that you're talking about, the idea that marketing, artistic planning, and learning and engagement are all involved from the very beginning. I mean, this is right, the arts administrator's dream of a perfectly matrixed organization. Will you share a little bit just what really changes when all of these departments feel involved and engaged from the very beginning instead of being brought in later in the process?
I think where an orchestra finds itself now, it used to be so compartmentalized from a programming perspective too. So you would have your really important core subscription program. And then if there was any time you do sort of crossover and a movie, and then if there was any time left, you'd let education have a couple of calls. And that's not what an orchestra is anymore. I mean, and those boundaries have blurred. So it makes perfect sense that between the three of us, there's no boundaries either.
And I think for learning and engagement, or, the education program, we're in a sort of unique situation in that we don't actually hold the keys to anything. The Director of Artistic Planning holds the keys to the planning process and the schedule. The Director of Marketing holds the keys to the audience. The Director of Orchestra Management holds the key to the orchestra. I don't have a key to anything. So I'm actually really, really reliant on my colleagues being collaborative and respectful in the way that we are here, or else it's so easy, and you see it everywhere, that really these programs become marginal, small scale, not really considered core to the business of the organization. So for me, when we work like this, it's utterly transformative. It's the difference between the program being ambitious and world class or not.
Absolutely. But I think, and you even mentioned this, I don't know if it's totally normalized yet across the industry. So before we even talk about tactics for keeping your teams in sync, what sort of philosophical shifts needed to take place first?
So I think a big part of some of the change that we've experienced in how our three teams work together is because within marketing, we've reframed the mission of what we do. So I think a lot of marketing teams have their financial target and their external goal, like finding audience and making these budgets. And we've reset that view to be that we're equally supporting the internal teams. I think when marketing teams' resources are tight, you'll just focus exclusively on that external goal and the revenue around it. And then what immediately happens is you'll prioritize only the concerts that make the most money. So they come to the top of the list, and everything sort of starts to sort by what's going to bring in the biggest external gains and returns. And so we've done a lot to shift the views and expectations within marketing that we're supporting everything equally. And that even comes to the support for all of the programs, whether it's our big subscription series concerts or some of our big presents with films, but we're also going to give equal effort and attention and campaign support to any learning and engagement activity.
That's great.
And I guess the thing we're trying to do here in artistic planning is not have a hierarchy of activity, that everything that the orchestra chooses to do in its limited amount of time in a year is equally important. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. And so having that support from marketing, and the way that John and I plan this season is holistic as well. It's not like here as you can have these 2 days. It's how can we make this work and how can we interleave what you need to do and what we're all trying to do and do it together. And the flow down effect of that has been even when, we present the season or we're at a full company strategic summit. Traditionally, I would be standing up there presenting the season or talking about future artistic planning. We always do it together, the three of us, because it's the three of us who are sort of building this future together. It's not just me through the choices that me and my team make and then they just sell it. It's the story that we're telling. It's the way we work together. It's around and within the core season.
I love what you're saying about there's no hierarchy in programs, which I think is a really interesting and important idea for all of us to process and think about together.
And I do think the trust bit, I think, is absolutely key. I think we know that we are three people in the right jobs who know what we're doing. And I've never seen a moment where, Melissa puts on the table some crazy wild idea and Charles or Charles's team goes, oh God, here we go again. No, there's just none of that there because there is total trust that if it's something Melissa is putting on the table, it's the right thing. And I think that sort of goes in all three directions.
How then do you align on shared goals across departments? I mean, hopefully we're all lucky to find our compatriots to create a system like this, but just talking tactically for a second, how does that go? Are there certain meetings that keep everyone together? Why don't you walk me through the process a little bit?
Our marketing artistic weekly meeting, it's at 4:30 on a Tuesday, and Tuesday is a very heavy meeting day. So for me, it's my fifth meeting of the day, and you would think stale, tired, and over it by then. But actually, it's really energizing and fun. And part of the reason I think all three of us are enjoying this so much is that in all of our roles, it's sort of lonely, isn't it? Being the one that has to make the decision and, is it successful or failure? And what is that measurement? And, you're there on your own. Well, when you work like this, you're not lonely.
It is one of our funnest meetings of the week. I think there's no blaming. I think when things go wrong or don't meet the measures we'd set out for success, we're not asking what went wrong. Actually, we're kind of asking what did we learn from it? What did work? Because something always works. It may not be a financial success, but it might have attracted new audiences or reframed to the public what the orchestra can be if it's a new format. So it's a very open space of trust and respect and always looking at what we can learn from what we're doing.
I have to say, this is something that I really tried to preach a lot of by the time I was in my last position at the center, working with all of the different curators there, because my empathy for my marketing colleagues was such that I know often it felt like programming really wanted to wait until something was in really good shape before handing that off to marketing, right? Not wanting anyone to get ahead of their skis, not wanting an idea to feel like it was reality before it was ready. So I'm curious, how did you navigate past any of that tension or concern that might otherwise have existed about how you look at projects that might not be in their final form, but still want to be part of the conversation early on with your colleagues in a different team?
I think it's that sort of trust that we have in each other, that there isn't the fear or the defensiveness to share things before they're cooked. In fact, we really look forward to sharing ideas, in real time, because we want them to be as strong as they can be. And we're very lucky to have colleagues who, it's so exciting to have enthusiasm and their eyes are shining and that they're looking forward to things like you and that it's very open. They can comment and say, what about this? Or this would be the angle we would take. And so we're all learning at the same time. And I mean, it's great when you've worked in an industry for 30 something years and you can still on a weekly basis learn something and, find new angles and be interested.
We have an additional meeting, which is Charles' team and my team every fortnight, which is more focused on sort of implementation, I suppose, working through stuff that's coming up in the year. And so that existed before Charles, but it's been amazing to watch how that meeting has changed from one where we were very much different teams to one where it feels like we're sort of the same team. We had one yesterday where we had a really good result for a schools concert in regional New South Wales, and there was such a strong sense of it being a shared victory. It was a real moment of we are one team, and it was very special.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what ways this type of collaboration has filtered down to each of your teams? So have you seen changes in the ways that they communicate and work together and share ownership?
We've been working over the last 2 years to get our teams to talk more outside those meetings. Don't wait for the meetings to do all the work and have all the conversations, keep the work going in between. Go talk, go walk. We're not in a very big office. Walk to someone's desk, talk to them more. That's the other big key to what we're doing is lots and lots of communication and conversation so that we're now at a point, there's not just this connection among the three of us at the top of our departments, but there's lots of connecting points beneath us and between our three teams. And so it's helping us to do even more and just be more efficient.
And we also have chat groups on Teams, for instance, and that used to be letting everybody know things in real time, changes, thoughts, but it's actually evolved now and it's quite chatty and it's, oh, have you seen this? Or I listened to this piece of music the other day. Not only are we working together, but actually we're kind of sharing enthusiasm and wanting to sort of share musical possibilities with each other. And it's very, very special.
Maybe one of you can talk us through an example of a program. Maybe I think Listen to This is something that you've told me about before, and how it comes to life or is made better through this type of really meaningful, dedicated collaboration.
So Listen to This is one of those concert formats where it's just a single work on the program and the conductor speaks to the audience throughout and pulls the work apart on stage for the audience to really get into it. So it's a sort of illustrated lecture with full orchestra. This was something SSO used to do for a long time, but we hadn't done it for, I think, 14 years maybe. But when I started, Melissa and I very quickly agreed that we wanted to bring that back as a sort of flagship feature of the learning and engagement program and really built it from the ground up with marketing. So everything from venue to duration to format to price, the whole thing was actually co-designed with marketing. And it was wonderful. And it was from the very first conversation, the marketing team was so enthusiastic, and I have in the past experienced that moment where you put a new product on the table and the marketing team goes, oh, we don't have the capacity to deliver that, or, oh, that's going to be very difficult to build an audience for. But it was absolutely the opposite. And I think this is a feature of the way we work together, that the ambition was shared. My ambition immediately became their ambition as well. We did the first one in the series this year and it's basically sold out. The net promoter score for it was, I think, the highest we've had for a concert this year. We do it in the Sydney Opera House because that's what the marketing team wanted. I wanted to do it in a smaller venue, but they were more ambitious than I was. And from day one, the result has exceeded all of our expectations.
Yeah, a lot of the people in our team were immediately excited by it. And we really appreciate the opportunity to be involved from the very beginning, because that just means that no matter what happens, all of us are sharing in the outcome. And in this case, it was, as John mentioned, nearly sold out, made its financial target. And I think most importantly of all, it was a very big new audience, a lot of even tourism sales through the Opera House. So it really ticked tons of the conventional metrics of success, even if you focus just on the financials. But it also had a lot of other important gains and was a massive, amazing launch to the series, which still has more to come throughout this year.
I'm curious if this approach has enabled more risk-taking in your programming.
I mean, what is risk-taking? Is it Schoenberg? Then, yeah, we did Guru Leader and sold out 2 performances. But actually, when you work like this, there's not some scary, spiky, spicy thing sitting in there scaring the hell out of everyone. Oh, huge risk, because you've kind of built it together.
Why do you think people think of certain programs as risky then? Is it because it's actually marketing concerned about selling those tickets?
Yeah.
So one might say that because of the collaboration, you get to bypass that. Is that fair, Charles?
Yeah, it's so interesting. an artistic brain versus a marketing brain, like what risk means to you. So
Yeah.
as you say that, Melissa, I understand that someone's brain for an orchestra, you'd go immediately to the most out there, unheard of work that an orchestra could play. My brain went to, for thinking about, are we taking risks? I think we have, and we've taken a lot, because I think about, with the way we're working, what have we done? And if we weren't all of us in our roles working this way, what would we have not done? And that's included things like performing in new venues and unlocking potential there, to experiment with taking the orchestra into new locations or new venues all around Sydney. Like we talked about already, some of the new product lines like Listen to This and master classes, new formats of concerts that we've done, but even things like within our core programs, like our core classical or our core commercial product line called Sydney Symphony Presents. There's a lot of things that I don't think would have happened if we didn't have this completely free flow, like let's grow, let's take risks. Last year, we had the potential to do more concerts on a program several times. And every time we were like, yes, let's do it. Let's unlock it. If
Oh,
we can do
wow.
5 Toy Stories, let's do it. And let's not hold any back. Let's just put them all to market and let people do their thing. Beethoven 9 was doing really well. And usually we only do, on a core classical week, we'll do 4 concerts. That's our maximum. And we have a 2,700 seat concert hall. So 4 of those is a lot of seats. And Beethoven 9 sold out. And we were like, is there a chance to add a 5th one? We've got audience asking for it. We did that just a few weeks ago. We added a second Anna Lapwood recital and had only 6 weeks to sell it, which normally would be a marketer's worst nightmare. But because we're talking so much, we knew there was a potential to add it. Melissa's team was communicating along the way with me, like, okay, it's almost here. We think we have all the things approved. So I was able to get marketing ready to go, that we pushed it to market and sold it out. But you could see where another marketing team who's worried about something not selling would have said no to all of these things. And that's dozens of performances right there in just the last 2 years. So to me, that's what I think about the risks. All of them are, could this thing not sell? And then everyone is upset about something not making revenue. So that's where we've shifted the culture of what we're doing quite a bit. And we're still even working to set that example for the whole institution, so that with that amount of putting out new events, there's always going to be something that won't make target. And I feel like the 10% out of, like we're probably having like a 90% success rate right now. And I think that 10%, something here or there, not making the targets we hope for, is the trade-off. And we just have to work as a group to like reframe that when those few things come along that aren't meeting the success metrics we set. We have to remind the organization and our teams that, okay, yeah, but look at these other like 9 things
Yeah.
that did terrific.
I like your framing of that 10%. I would go one step further and say trying and the act of doing all of this is the success. So something not meeting target becomes less about success and failure and more about the process being what it is, and being able to look at the macro and having that tolerance for trying new, going together instead of alone, creates an environment where you're not living and dying by every single show's capacity. I'm curious, Charles, how you felt empowered to take that approach where you weren't having to fall into the usual trap of prioritizing the dollars, which so many marketing teams can get very risk averse to compromising.
I think I experienced a lot of things that just weren't efficient. Like I've been in organizations where artistic and marketing barely speak. They speak once, and it's when you hand the programming over to sell. There's just so much that's lost in that when you don't have more interactions. So I kind of just learned that through trial and error across a few other organizations. It's something I try to model as well for the team. Like, don't default immediately to no and why things won't work. Like, let's ask the questions and think about, like, is there a path to this being successful? And if there's a path, well, let's explore that. Like, there's always the chance something won't work, but you can't, if you go that way, you'll end up saying no to everything. An organization isn't going to grow that way. They'll just kind of be in a culture of a slow decline. If there's nothing new, nothing can change. There's no yeses.
That's right. That's well said. Melissa, returning to some of what you were talking about and the trust building, I am so curious with an orchestra, which are not historically the most flexible of groups, particularly with you telling us, an orchestra of over 100 musicians. How do you create and foster the type of nimbleness and flexibility that allows you to kind of be that equal partner in conversations about adding shows or trying new spaces? How do you approach that with your team and with the musicians?
Look, I think that the orchestra as a whole, they're turning up and everyone's working extremely hard. They have these huge houses and people are loving the experiences that they're having in the hall with them. And so I think there is kind of an esprit de corps in the organization that we kind of feel like we're in a moment in the history of the organization that is sort of golden, or that there's a forward momentum, and it comes at a great effort by everyone in the organization. But, I think it's part of, if you're in the Sydney Symphony, we want to lead, we want to be an exciting orchestra, we want to make courageous decisions, we want to touch as many lives as possible. And so there's a degree of pragmatism in terms of health and safety for players, their employment contract. But, in the case of adding a second Beethoven 9 in a day, we're very aware that that was a huge ask, and we did consult widely, and the players are extremely generous and agreed to do it, and that was another, 2,600 people who's had the best time. So yeah, it's pretty great that we all feel like we're a part of something.
I think that's remarkable. And I think as you talk about the trust building between the three of you and how that trickles down to your team, to me, that rings true that musicians or folks who might not be involved in the meetings we're talking about or some of the process that allows the work to happen, but are truly the reason that people are having transformative experiences with the arts. I think that speaks volumes. It's pretty remarkable, and certainly an act of leadership as a whole for the musicians in the organization. For all three of you, as you think about going from building a season to packaging and talking about that work, and you're doing that together, how do you think through at each decision point who is leading? Because even in a collaboration at a certain point, decisions need to be made. And so how do you think about that handoff as you go from artist to audience in such a collaborative environment?
So I don't think we actually have a point where there's ever something being handed off and then owned elsewhere. Like when I say we're collaborating from start to finish, it truly means that we're pulled in at the very earliest stages of the artistic or the programming process. And then there is the point where the work comes more to us and that we're now about to run the campaign and sell it and leading up to the concert. But we're still connecting back with the artistic planning and the learning and engagement teams all along the way, even as we're trying to think about audiences, trying to craft the messaging or the campaign. Like we actually give them a chance to weigh in on the copy we've written for each of the things for the season, because we were trying to basically make sure that the direction we're going with the public, that it's really true to the vision, and also that they're speaking with artists. They know a lot that we can learn and take it directly to the audience. And even after something's on sale, we're still connecting and talking about what's working and what's not, and how to get access to artists for, social media or whatever, or for media. So I feel like there's not ever a point that there's like a handoff, and because I feel like that's what's very traditional. There's like, when is it handed off and who's owning it at each point? There isn't really that. We're actually kind of all collaborating throughout the entire life cycle of any of our programs.
We had a meeting, for instance, yesterday, and, we are at that pointy end where in the olden days we used to hand it over and we'd never see it till there was a brochure. But yesterday, we had a meeting, our marketing meeting, and it was really interesting. So the people in Charles' team who are actually starting to work on the actual campaign now shared some of their thoughts about packaging, or, what are the pillars, do you think? And actually it was just a really free room. What are the highlights for you? What do you think is and And it was a really great way for all of us to reframe the season. So if you're in artistic planning, you're sort of looking at this month by month. If you're in, marketing, you're thinking, who's in the piano series? So we actually had and it was a really creative time. So it's so nice for us at that end of the business to be involved as much as I think it for marketing to be involved when we're agonizing over a violin concerto.
Yeah. Melissa, your point is really well taken, that just as we want to think about how marketing can be in the room with programming and learning and engagement early on, to your point, programming is quite an asset to be in the room with marketing through the end. And I like this kind of no handoff discussion, because I think that is a little bit more difficult of a concept to really hang on to than just we are better collaborators when we are in rooms together. I think really making it clear that this is something we co-own start to finish is the crux of what's making the work that the three of you are doing together so special. So I appreciate that. It seems to me, from what I have learned about the SSO, that the 2026 season is the biggest in over a decade. Do you have any data you can share to illustrate that growth to our listeners?
Yeah, so I guess anyone might be curious how everything that we're doing, how that translates into audiences. So as John's team and Melissa's team have expanded our programming activity and existing programming or adding new things, we've basically taken an approach of let's put everything out to the audience and let them decide. The one thing marketing has asked of both of their teams is let's get things on sale as early as possible to leave lots of time.
Yeah.
Because with lots of new products, you need time to build the audience. So we started growing in 2025, and then obviously the biggest expansion is this year in 2026. But just looking at last year, it actually was our highest revenue in the organization's history. We've had year over year subscription growth every year coming out of COVID, and last year was the highest of that. And we have more new audience than ever. So we're actually bringing in, I want to say since before COVID, about 25,000 more ticket buying households. And then we also have number of tickets are restored back to what the peak was in the decade before COVID. And that was all just as of last year. But so far this year, where we've added on even more activity, we've actually seen our subscribers adding a lot of that on. So we're getting new audiences into some of the new series, but subscribers are deepening their relationship. And we saw the average number of tickets each subscriber was buying grow this year. So they were the first in line to take us up on, the listen to this or some of the other things. It's, in my mind, no exaggeration to say that a lot of that activity and growth wouldn't have happened without the tight collaboration between our teams.
That's incredible. John, I'm curious because I think learning and engagement has also grown significantly. So can you talk a little bit from your perspective about what was able to unlock that expansion?
Yes. Yeah. I think when you were talking about risk before, does this way of working together allow risk? I was thinking it really also allows growth. Learning and engagement has historically been very strong here, but I think it had a tough time during the pandemic and the Opera House closure for refurbishment. And so, my role was created in 2024 really with a view to bringing this program back in a strong way. So that kind of set me up well, working closely with Melissa to rebuild this program. And 26 is kind of the first year that we see it in almost its full form. So we've brought all of our schools concerts into the Sydney Opera House for the first time. We've re-established the Discovery series as Listen to This. We're doing open rehearsals for the general public for the first time ever. We've got our masterclass series to let people get closer to our artists. We've established a subscription series in the Western Sydney Coliseum, which is an amazing new venue. The regional touring program has expanded. Our fellowship program, which is our 24-year-old.
So much.
Yeah, it is a lot. I'm really tired right now, but
I was going to say, do you need a nap? How are you doing all of this? This is enormous.
Well, we can do it because we work in a way without friction. We couldn't do this if there was friction and inefficiency in the way we were working. It only works because we can lean really heavily on our other departments and colleagues to help us deliver all this. And it only works because, as Melissa said, it's treated equally.
Yeah.
And I think if any audience is listening to this or asking like, oh, could I do this? The other thing I would remind them is this is just in 2 years what we've done. So anything is possible and you could start tomorrow.
And if you were starting tomorrow, what would you start with?
More conversations,
Yeah.
more talking between your teams, and starting to create the space to trust and respect each other's work, and then think about what's possible. I think kind of saying yes to as many things as you can, because that's what we're doing. I think we're saying yes to almost everything, really.
I remember the day after Charles started, I went one of your first days. I remember I walked across the office and I sat on your desk, and there was like a hushed shock in the organization. And I went, everyone's staring at us because the artistic and marketing are talking to each other.
So that's the secret. You've got to
Yeah.
go and sit on
Yeah.
the director of
There you go.
marketing's desk.
You've just got to make the first step.
I think that is great advice. You just have to make the first step. Ask
Yeah.
questions, be curious, and be teammates. Don't do things just because they've always been done the same way. I would love to know from each of you, what is giving you hope right now about the field, whether that's the orchestra field or the arts more broadly?
Those two. It's true. You know, I'm at the end of my career. I'm the old one, and I'm having fun. I didn't think I was going to have fun, but yeah, it's I feel quite energized, and yeah,
That's beautiful.
those two.
Aww.
Oh,
You. Aww. Yeah, I mean, yes, and I think my professional life would be very different and a lot harder without these two. So yes, I echo Melissa's very generous statement, but I do think we're on a really exciting path towards a sort of a new model of an orchestra in the 21st century. That makes me excited and gives me hope.
I know it's like kind of a difficult moment for this sector, and it has been really since COVID. And some people might say before, as subscription model began to like become less of a thing in today's modern world. But I think there's a lot of excitement in where we're at, because I think a lot about our business models wasn't working for a long time. And the moment like COVID and post COVID with challenge finding audiences, it's actually forcing people to have a lot of difficult conversations that should have happened decades ago about how the performing arts should work, and creating access for the arts to more people, I feel like that's happening a lot in the last 5, 6 years. So some people could find that really terrifying, but it actually is the most exciting thing, because I think a lot of change is going to come out of it, and new things will be created that didn't exist before. And I think a lot of institutions like ours that have been around for decades will adapt and kind of come into a new era and grow like we're doing. So I find all of that really exciting, but I also recognize a lot of people find this the most terrifying time to work in this sector. And I think that's probably for similarities in what we're going through across in Australia and America that everybody kind of understands.
No, I like that. I think holding together, the hope, the darkness, the light, and the fear all at once is something we all have to get better at. And so what you're talking about really speaks to me right now. All right. Well, we have reached our quickfire culture questionnaire. So we're gonna be speedy little mice here. What is one piece of culture, a TV show, a book, a TikTok trend that you are currently obsessed with?
I guess the last thing I watched was The Other Bennett Sister.
The Other Bennett Sister. Did you like it?
I did. Yeah. I love it, Jane Austen.
I mean, amen. John, your obsession.
I have abandoned all streaming services for the last couple of months, and
well, I guess you have 3,000 programs to run, so you just simply are out of time. I understand.
But I am on my 18th book this year, and I just finished When the Crows Fly South by Lisa Ridson, and it was just one of the most magnificent things I've ever read, and I cried for days. So read that.
Well, that's a stunning endorsement. Charles.
I do love Wicked, and I've been an OG Wicked fan. I read the books, saw the musical in the earliest days. I've seen the musical many times. So anyway, I definitely enjoyed that it finally, a great story like that was made into films, which both I've watched multiple times.
Couldn't agree more. You are in great company. They have now been added to my John Chu plain movie collection.
I actually have a CD-ROM that's burned with a bootleg recording someone took of the original Broadway show illegally.
Charles,
like
we're the
in
same person right now. Yes.
I don't even have a way to play it anymore.
Do you still have like a QuickTime movie file of Adina's final night in the red tracksuit?
No, but I've
Because
seen that.
Nobody wants it.
Listen, we're gonna coordinate. Okay. If you could go back in time, Melissa, what live performance or event would you want to attend?
The Rite of Spring in Paris.
Amazing answer.
That's a good one.
John?
I reckon it would have to be Freddie Mercury and Montserrat Caballé performing Barcelona in front of the Magic Fountains in 1992. There we go.
Wow.
And if you paid us a lot, we would reenact it for you, but there's no time.
I would obviously be Montserrat.
Obviously.
Obviously, you'd be Freddie.
Yeah, exactly. Duh.
Charles?
I don't know exactly, but it would be something before any audio or video existed.
Come to Rite of Spring with me.
That's a beautiful answer. And collaboration travels through time, and we love that. Okay, what is one free resource, this can be in any field, in any way, that everyone should check out?
I've come across a few Substacks in the past couple of years, and the one that I've been reading most recently is Emil Kang's, who I think have worked in different executive leadership roles or board roles. And as an executive leader, it's been a resource for me just to learn about like how to create the best dynamic of an executive team and a board, but also to like realize that the challenges that exist today have been there for decades, because he's talked a lot about his experiences. So that's the one that comes to mind for me.
That's lovely.
What does resource include? What can I include in that?
Anything. Say literally anything that comes to your mind.
SBS On Demand is free and has over 1,000 movies on it, but you can't access it outside of Australia.
So everyone first get a VPN.
Yeah.
And then visit SPS Online. And hopefully what I'm talking about is not illegal.
The only other thing I use is I have a pet cow and I don't really know what to do with a cow. So YouTube's been very useful for my farming to teach me what to do with a cow.
I feel like we're getting into we need to restart this episode.
I'm the YouTube farmer, the original YouTube farmer. And the chickens is very good on YouTube as well.
Amazing. Okay, so now to shift gears, although I definitely want to hear more about your cow. The final question always on this pod is, if you could broadcast one message to executive directors, leadership teams, staff, and boards of thousands of arts organizations, what would that message be?
Don't be afraid. Just open yourself up and jump in. There is shared purpose.
Gorgeous answer.
I think to kind of have a growth mindset and take risks, which we're doing here. And I think that we have the same issues like every arts organization is facing, like rising costs, and we have a structural deficit, changing audience behaviors, subscriptions are declining. And if you don't actually try to grow and like take risks, nothing's going to happen. I know most people's reaction is to scale back or retreat or cut things, but we've done the exact opposite and we've had really strong results very quickly by doing that.
I suppose I could add, if I sort of think about my own little niche of learning and engagement, treat it with the respect it deserves and treat it as though it matters as much as everything else, because that's why you just don't see it succeeding at so many organizations and why we are succeeding here.
3 great answers. Thank you all for doing this together. Thank you for the work you're doing and the leadership you're showing all of us by doing it collaboratively and with great spirit and laughter and joie de vivre for all that's to come. I really, really love spending this time with you. So thank you. Thank you for listening to Arts Unscripted. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a moment to rate us or leave a review. A nice comment goes a long way in helping other people discover the show. And if you haven't already, click the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. We've got some great episodes coming your way, and I don't want you to miss them. A huge thanks to our team behind the scenes, including Karen McConerty, Yaye Stem, Stephanie Medina, Jess Barabee, and Rachel Purcell Fountain. Our music is by Who Is Uzo. Don't forget to follow Capacity on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube for regular content to help you market smarter. You can also sign up for Capacity's newsletter at capacityinteractive.com. And I hope you'll reach out to us and let us know what you think and who you'd like to hear from next on Arts Unscripted. I'm Monica Holt. Thanks for listening.